We live in interesting times.
40 headlines.
Russian President Vladimir Putin warned Ukraine against any reckless acts on Tuesday after Kiev declared martial law in response to Moscow's seizure of 3 of its Navy vessels.
U.S. President Donald Trump warns that the deal taking Britain out of the European Union may hamper U.S.-UK trade.
Cheers and applause erupt at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory as the waist-high unmanned lander called InSight touches down on Mars, capping a nearly 7-year journey from design to launch to landing. I'm Alma Angeles, wherever you're watching from around the world. Thank you very much for joining us.
We welcome our viewers here in the Philippines and around the world. Good evening, everyone. I'm Sam Cepeda.
And now to the news. Russian President Vladimir Putin warned Ukraine against any reckless acts after Kiev declared martial law in response to Moscow's seizure of 3 of its Navy vessels. The Ukrainian parliament late on Monday voted in favor of President Petro Poroshenko's request for the introduction of martial law in parts of the country for 30 days. The decision came as Ukraine and Russia faced their most dangerous crisis in years after Russian forces fired on boarded and captured Kiev ships on Sunday off the coast of Crimea. Now, the incident was the first major confrontation at sea in the long-running conflict, pitting Ukraine against Moscow and Russian-backed separatists in the country's east. Sunday's incident has been playing out on Russian and Ukrainian television screens with dramatic footage of Russian ships chasing down a Ukrainian tugboat that was trying to pass through the Kerch Strait from the Black Sea into the Sea of Azov. Ukraine has accused Russian border patrol vessels of ramming the tugboat, which was accompanied by 2 small warships, and on firing on the Ukrainian vessels. U.S. Ambassador Nikki Haley was the first U.S. official to speak out about Russia's actions.
The United States would welcome a normal relationship with Russia. As President Trump said many times, the United States would welcome a normal relationship with Russia. But outlaw actions like this one continue to make that impossible.
Now, President Trump weighed in to say this.
We do not like what's happening either way. We don't like what's happening, and hopefully it'll get straightened out. I know Europe is not, they are not thrilled. They're working on it too. We're all working on it together.
Now, for its part, Russia's FSB security service, which oversees border forces, confirmed that weapons had been fired and the vessels were seized, but accused Ukrainian ships of crossing illegally into Russian waters and of ignoring warnings. Tensions have been building for months over the Kerch Strait, especially after Russia built a new bridge across the waterway that gives it a land connection to Crimea, annexed by Moscow in 2014. Moscow has accused Kiev of planning Sunday's confrontation as a provocation aimed at drumming up support for Poroshenko ahead of elections next year and convincing Western governments to impose further sanctions on Russia.
Что касается вчерашнего инцидента, это была однозначная провокация. Жестко призываем западных спонсоров Киева все-таки угомонить тех, кто пытается сейчас на военной истерии заработать политические очки в связи с предстоящими выборами или прочими событиями на Украине.
Now, President Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin may meet on the sidelines of the G20 summit in Argentina next weekend.
Former First Lady Imelda Marcos is asking the Sandigan Bayan to forward her case to the Supreme Court for further proceedings as she announced her plans to seek the help of the High Court over her graft conviction. Marcos made the appeal in a notice filed before the Anti-Graft Court's 5th Division. She was convicted for participating in the management of several Swiss foundations while a member of the Interim Batasang Pambansa and when she was Minister of the Ministry of Human Settlements from 1968 to 1986. The former First Lady was sentenced to 6 to 11 years imprisonment for each count. On November 12, Marcos filed a motion for leave to avail of post-conviction remedies, justifying her absence on the promulgation of the decision. A hearing was held 4 days after, allowing Marcos to post 150,000 pesos or peso bail granted her temporary liberty while her motion for leave was being deliberated.
Well, that was expected, no? That the Marcoses would resort to all legal remedies, no? Like an appeal, no? But again, what was controversial, no, and irregular, yung hindi siya inaresto, no? Because there was already a conviction, and with that conviction, an arrest warrant should have been issued, no, by the Sandigan Bayan. But yun nga, walang ganong nangyari. So I think that is still a relevant issue. Dapat hulihin si Imelda, makapagpiano siya, no? And at least that would be for posterity, no? That at least for that moment we have the Marcoses, no, in full public view na convict and inaresto, no, before bail, no. Kasi bail should happen, no, after you have been under the jurisdiction of the court.
To the U.S. now, President Trump has strongly defended the use of tear gas at the Mexican border after hundreds of Central American migrants tried to force through a police blockade into the U.S.
But I would say the violence is very strong. We have over 500 people that are serious criminals and gang members, and it's a tough situation. We just don't want that in our country, and we're keeping it in Mexico, and Mexico's done a very good job. But a lot of the law enforcement people from Mexico have been very seriously injured. They've been badly hurt. You saw what happened yesterday. If you look at Tijuana, where not only the mayor, but a lot of the people were interviewed saying, hey, these are rough people. You start talking to them and they punch you in the face. We don't want that in our country. We don't want it, okay?
You mentioned the rough people, you mentioned the criminals, but how did you feel when you saw the images of the women and children running from the tear gas?
Well, I do say, why are they there? I mean, I have to start off. First of all, the tear gas is a very minor form of the tear gas itself. It's very safe. The ones that were suffering to a certain extent were the people that were putting it out there, but it's very safe. But you really say, why is a parent running up into
and poverty in Honduras and in search of asylum north of the border? After the unrest, Mexico deported 98 Central America's asylum law. But others insist he is exaggerating to stoke fears and achieve his political goals.
Todos sabemos que Donald Trump no nos ve como seres humanos, nos ve como animales, y obviamente eso es como nos va a tratar.
Ya empezaron a pegarle a la gente y eso no se hace. Peor los niños son los que más valen en todos los países.
Beijing has ordered an investigation into claims by a Chinese scientist to have created the world's first genetically edited babies, a move that would be a groundbreaking medical first, but which has generated a barrage of criticism. A video posted on YouTube by university professor He Jiankui said that the twin girls born a few weeks ago had their DNA altered to prevent them from contracting HIV, prompting a heated debate among the scientific community. The professor, who was educated at Stanford University in the U.S. and works from a lab in the southern Chinese city of Shenzhen, said the twins' DNA was modified using CRISPR, a technique which allows scientists to remove and replace a strand with pinpoint precision. He said the babies known as Lulu and Nana although they are not their real names, were born through regular IVF, but using an egg which was specially modified before being inserted into the womb. Editing the genes of embryos, which can alter other genes, is banned in many countries because DNA changes, which will be passed to future generations, could have unforeseen effects on the entire gene pool. Chinese scientists were appalled by his work. A joint statement issued by more than 120 Chinese scientists condemned it as madness and called on authorities to enact laws on this kind of research.
NASA's $993 million Mars InSight lander has successfully touched down on the red planet to listen for quakes and study how rocky planets form. Take a look. Now, cheers and applause erupted at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory on Monday as a waist-high unmanned lander called InSight touched down on Mars, capping a nearly 7-year journey from design to launch to landing. The vehicle appeared to be in good shape, according to the first communications received from the Martian surface. But as expected, the dust kicked up during the landing obscured the first picture InSight sent back, which was heavily flecked. The nail-biting entry, descent, and landing phase began at 11:47 a.m. at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena, California, home to mission control for Mars InSight, and ended 1 second before 1953 GMT. A carefully orchestrated sequence already fully pre-programmed on board the spacecraft unfolded over the following several minutes, coined 6.5 minutes of terror. Speeding faster than a bullet at 12,300 miles an hour, the heat-shielded spacecraft encountered scorching friction as it entered the Mars atmosphere. The heat shield soared to a temperature of 2,700 Fahrenheit before it was discarded. The 3 landing legs deployed and the parachute popped out, easing InSight down to the Martian surface. The spacecraft is NASA's first to touch down on Earth's neighboring planet since the Curiosity rover arrived in 2012. More than half of 43 attempts to reach Mars with rovers, orbiters, and probes by space agencies from around the world have failed. NASA is the only space agency to have made it and is invested in these robotic missions as a way to prepare for the first Mars-bound human explorers in the 2030s.
We'll be back with more news when Eagle News International returns.
Health is our most important asset.
MTRCV ang mag-provide na appropriate ratings sa lahat ng TV shows. para ugaliin ng pamilya ang responsableng panonood. Teamwork tayo, parents!
Rated G, good for all! Oops, rated PG!
Dapat may mga magulang para sagutin ang mga tanong ng kabataan.
Grabe, rated SPG, maseman!
Itan ang paggabay.
Pag rated MTRCB, rated responsable.
Welcome back. I'm Jeffrey Angeles, and this is Environment News. President Donald Trump said he doesn't believe his own government's report last week that warned of massive economic losses if carbon emissions continue to feed climate change. He rejected the central warning in the National Climate Assessment, which said there will be hundreds of billions of dollars in losses by the end of the century due to climate change, without substantial and sustained global mitigation. It said the effects will spill into global trade, hitting import and export prices and U.S. businesses with overseas operations and supply chains.
Yeah, I don't believe it.
You don't believe it?
No, I don't believe it. And here's the other thing. You're going to have China and Japan and all of Asia and all of these other countries, you know, addresses our country. Right now we're at the cleanest we've ever been, and that's very important to me. But if we're clean, but every other place on earth is dirty, that's not so good. So I want clean air, I want clean water, very important.
Thank you very much.
Since becoming president in 2016, he has pulled the United States out of the International Paris Agreement on attempting to bring down global temperatures and torn up a raft of environmental protection laws, saying the U.S. economy needs the boost. In October, Trump said during a visit to inspect hurricane damage in the southern state of Georgia that climate change is going to go back and forth rather than be permanent.
No, there's something there. There's no question. There is something there, man-made or not. I mean, there's something there, and it's going to go, and it's going to go back and forth, but there is something there. But again, 50 years ago it was brutal. 1890s were brutal. You have different times.
Lake Chilwa in Malawi is drying up, and the around 7,000 people who live around it and who rely heavily on it for their livelihood are now finding themselves looking desperately for an alternative income. The lake's water levels have been receding for the past 10 years due to increasing temperatures as a result of climate change. Watch this.
Kwa mavuto kuphela kwa nyanja yathu ndikumene kwatigwesa mmavuto msikana tisakira uja basi unafa nyanja yaphwera kuteko ife pano tikungokhala tili pa umphawi.
In 2012, there was a recession where the lake lost about 80% of its water. Then it recovered in 2013, but not fully. So since then, every year we've been experiencing these recessions.
And it's time now for some trivia. Global warming can be caused by, is it global shortage in air conditioners, extremely vigorous dancing, or humans releasing carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases into the atmosphere? The answer is humans release carbon dioxide into the atmosphere by burning fossil fuels in cars and in power plants. This carbon dioxide can increase global warming by trapping energy here on Earth. The levels of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, the main driver of climate change, have hit a new record high, the UN said Thursday, warning that the time to act was running out. Ahead of the COP24 climate summit in Poland next month, top United Nations officials are again trying to raise the pressure on governments to meet the pledge of limiting warming to the less than 2 degrees Celsius enshrined in the 2015 Paris Accord.
The 2017 concentration in the atmosphere of CO2 is 46% higher than in pre-industrial 1750 year. The report indicates that for the last almost 20 years, from 1990, we have observed 41% increase of warming effect. Only CO2 alone contributes 82% to this increase. The last time Earth had concentration of CO2 of 400 parts per million was about 3 to 5 million years ago. And at that time, the reconstruction tells us that the average mean surface temperature was 2 or 3 degrees higher than now, and the sea level was 10 to 20 meters higher.
Emissions are the main factor that determines the amount of greenhouse gas levels, but concentration rates are a measure of what remains after a series of complex interactions between atmosphere, biosphere, lithosphere, cyrosphere, and the oceans. Roughly 25% of all emissions are currently absorbed by the oceans and biosphere, a term that accounts for all ecosystems on Earth. The UN's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has said that in order to keep warming below 1.5 degrees Celsius, net CO2 emissions must be at net zero, meaning the amount pumped into the atmosphere must equal the amount being removed, either through natural absorption or technological innovation. The world's oceans have absorbed more heat than previously thought over the last quarter of a century, scientists said Thursday, leaving Earth more sensitive still to the effect of climate change. Oceans cover more than 2/3 of the planet's surface and play a vital role in sustaining life on Earth. According to their most recent assessment this month, scientists from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change say the world's oceans have absorbed 90% of the temperature rise caused by man-made carbon emissions. But new research published in the journal Nature used a novel method of measuring ocean temperature. It found that for each of the last 25 years, oceans may have absorbed heat energy equivalent to as much as 150 times the amount of electricity mankind produces annually. That is between 10 to 70% higher than previous studies showed. Whereas those studies relied on tallying the excess heat produced by known man-made greenhouse gas emissions, a team of US-based scientists focused on two gases found naturally in the atmosphere, oxygen and carbon dioxide. Both gases are soluble in water, but the rate at which water absorbs them decreases as it warms. By measuring atmospheric oxygen and CO2 each year, scientists were able to estimate how much heat oceans had absorbed on a global scale. The authors initially calculated the oceans had warmed 60% more than previously thought. However, after some controversy, they acknowledged mistakes in the margin of error calculations and subsequently settled on a range of 10 to 70%. And that is all for me. I'm Jeffrey Angeles, and I'm 1 with 25. Back to you, Alma. And Eagle News International will be right back. Stay tuned.
Introducing Regent Potato Crackers. Thin in size, big on flavor. Available in 4 flavors: seaweed, cheese, onion cheese, and French garlic. Get yours now. Available in all leading supermarkets by Regent.
Health Hey guys, I'm here in New Jersey, the diner capital of the world. Tune in to Digital Nest on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 7:30 p.m. I'm Nikki, and I'm 1 with 25.
Welcome back. President Donald Trump warned that the deal taking Britain out of the European Union may inadvertently hamper trade between London and Washington.
Sounds like a great deal for the EU, and I think we have to do this. I think we have to take a look at seriously whether or not the UK is allowed to trade, because, you know, right now, if you look at the deal, they may not be able to trade with us. And that wouldn't be a good thing. Right now, as the deal stands, they may not be able to trade with the U.S. And I don't think they want that at all. That would be a very big negative for the deal.
He expressed hope that Prime Minister Theresa May will be able to do something about that. The British leader on Sunday closed 17 months of painful talks with Brussels by sealing Brexit arrangements with the 27 other EU heads of state and government. However, May faces a difficult task, getting a parliamentary approval for the deal.
This deal delivers what people voted for, and it is in the national interest.
British Prime Minister Theresa May faces Parliament as she sets off on a tricky task on convincing lawmakers to back her divorce deal with the EU.
We can back this deal, deliver on the vote of the referendum, and move on to building a brighter future of opportunity and prosperity for all our people. Or this House can choose to reject this deal and go back to square one. Because no one knows what would happen if this deal doesn't pass. It would open the door to more division and more uncertainty, with all the risks that will entail. And I can say to the House with absolute certainty that there is not a better deal available. And my fellow leaders were very clear on that themselves yesterday. Mr. Speaker, our message to the people of Gibraltar is clear. We will always stand by you. We are proud that Gibraltar is British, and our position on sovereignty has not and will not change.
There can be no doubt that this deal would leave us with the worst of all worlds. No say over future rules and no certainty for the future. Even the Prime Minister's own cabinet can't bring themselves to sell this deal.
Opposition Labour Party Chief Jeremy Corbyn called the withdrawal deal and accompanying political declaration on future relations an act of national self-harm.
Mr. Speaker, ploughing on is not stoic, it's an act of national self-harm. Instead of threatening this House with a no-deal scenario or a no-Brexit scenario, the Prime Minister now needs to prepare a Plan B, something her predecessors failed to do.
Corbyn said Labour would prefer closer economic links with the European Union through a comprehensive customs union and a strong single market deal. The deal came under heavy criticism from both Labour MPs and lawmakers from May's own Conservative Party. A crucial vote on the deal is expected next month.
Ploughing on is not stoic, it's an act of national self-harm. Instead of threatening this House with a no deal, I thank the Prime Minister for the advanced copy of her statement. And the Prime Minister confirm that under her deal, if we are to...
French President Emmanuel Macron acknowledged widespread anger over fuel taxes expressed by protesters over the last 10 days. But he said he would not back down on environmentally friendly policies.
Nous devons donc entendre les protestations d'alarme sociale, mais nous ne devons pas le faire en renonçant à nos responsabilités pour aujourd'hui et pour demain, parce qu'il y a aussi une alarme environnementale. Je dirais même plus, c'est que les inégalités sociales et territoriales que dénoncent à juste titre aujourd'hui nombre de nos concitoyens, elles sont bien souvent doublées d'inégalités environnementales.
He conceded that many French people felt that taxes were imposed from above and promised to accelerate the work of the government to lighten the load for working families and cut public spending. The 40-year-old centrist acknowledged that many struggling households felt penalized by the increase in fuel taxes this year. The spark for road blockades and demonstrations over the past 10 days. He offered minor concessions, saying he would propose a mechanism to adjust tax hikes when they occurred at the same time as an increase in oil prices internationally as they have this year. And he also called for a 3-month national consultation to draw up a roadmap for accelerating the country's transition away from fossil fuels, which he insisted remained his overall objective. One of the most frequent complaints from the so-called yellow vests is Macron's perceived elitism as well as his pro-business policies since taking office in May last year.
Global wage growth in 2017 fell to its lowest rate since 2008, far below levels before the global financial crisis, according to a new International Labour Organization or ILO report. The Global Wage Report 2018 to 2019 found that in real terms, adjusted for price inflation, global wage growth declined to 1.8% in 2017 from 2.4% in 2016. The findings are based on data from 136 countries.
We believe that we are, in our report, taking a more sophisticated and more accurate measure of the gender pay gap. The average figure we come up with is that women continue to be paid about 20% less than men for work of equal value around the world. In high-income countries, the gender pay gap tends to be higher among top-income earners, reflecting to some extent, I think, the phenomenon of the glass ceiling, whereas in emerging and developing countries, the gap tends to be much greater at the bottom end of the wage scale.
Another factor which weighs on the gender wage gap is motherhood. The report shows that mothers tend to have lower wages compared to non-mothers.
It's interesting, I think, to note, and worrying as well, that there is a very clear motherhood penalty for women, that the gender pay gap is increased when women have children, young children. And contrary to that, it's almost a mirror image, there is actually a fatherhood premium on wages. That is to say, men with young children actually do better than their counterparts without children. Wages continue to lag behind productivity, so the share of wealth and share of richness in our countries is going away from working people, and that inevitably has an impact on demand in our economies. So when people don't have money in their pocket to spend, I think there is a real danger that our economies grow more slowly, people can't find investment opportunities, and enterprises suffer as well. So this is not good news, and we hope that we can find ways of bringing about improvement.
Documentation about the gender pay gap to say that.
In other news, 7 European consumer groups filed complaints against Google with national regulators, accusing the internet giant of covertly tracking users' movements in violation of an EU regulation on data protection. The complaints cited a study by the Norwegian Consumer Council that concluded the internet giant used, quote, deceptive design and misleading information, which results in users accepting to be constantly tracked. Council official GRO Met Moen charged that Google uses extremely detailed and comprehensive personal data without an appropriate judicial basis, and the data is acquired by means of manipulative techniques. Complaints against Google were filed in the Czech Republic, Greece, Netherlands, Norway, Poland, Slovenia, and Sweden. They're based on the EU's General Data Protection Regulatory, or GDPR, which took effect in May. Now, Google responded by saying that, quote, location history is turned off by default, and you can edit, delete, or pause it at any time. If it's on, it helps improve services like predicted traffic on your commute. The news continues here on Eagle News International. We'll be right back. Stay tuned.
Manny Pacquiao said Tuesday that veteran trainer Freddie Roach never left his orbit despite a public split and was helping the Filipino boxing legend get ready for his upcoming bout in Las Vegas. Pacquiao was training in Manila ahead of the January 19 showdown against Adrian Broner, a fight that may be a prelude to a long speculated on rematch with Floyd Mayweather. The Roach-Pacquiao reunion comes after the men abruptly parted ways, breaking up one of boxing's most famous double acts following the Filipinos' defeat to Jeff Horn in 2017. Roach was reported to have been upset by his dismissal, but agreed to return after late-night talks with the fighter last week.
Ang sinasabi ko naman sa kanila, even in America, never na nawala si Freddie sa Team Pacquiao. Okay lang, excited na for more than 2 years. Babalik ulit tayo sa 2 years, mga ganun. Babalik ulit tayo sa Vegas para lumaban.
Pacquiao, the only fighter to win world titles in 8 different weight divisions, got a boost to his storied but slowing boxing career after stopping Argentina's Lucas Mathise in July in Kuala Lumpur. Just over 6 months later, he will be back in the ring, this time against Broner, a 29-year-old American, for his first U.S. fight since 2016. Undefeated Mayweather said in September he was ready to fight Pacquiao, but no definite plans have emerged since. Last week, the Filipino camp told reporters he and Mayweather have talked about fighting again, but said he would see after the Broner match.
Eagle Broadcasting Corporation Films Award-winning film Guerrero made its international tour in Rome, Italy. Here's Robbie Malabanan for the report.
EBC Films once again reaches Italy with a double screening set for today, November 25 at the Multisala Barberini here in Rome. The screenings are scheduled for 11:30 a.m. and 1 p.m. today to cater the large number of viewers that are gathering here today from all areas of Rome. Families are grabbing this perfect opportunity to bond viewing an inspirational and touching but at the same time amusing movie like Guerrero. An inspirational story about the ups and downs of a boxer and his young brother, Guerrero had its debut in 57 theaters in the Philippines last November 12.
Kahit anong mangyari, si Kuya pa din ang bida.
L'ho visto con mia sorella, Ate Nicole, e siamo venuti in due, solo noi due. Che sono film che trasmettono un messaggio attraverso il cinema e la scenografia. Da questo film ho appreso di mai arrendersi agli ostacoli e di andare sempre avanti e appunto, affrontare i problemi, soprattutto, prima di tutto pregando. E applicandolo alla vita reale, tipo a scuola, quando si prende un brutto voto non bisogna prendersela ma continuare a studiare, prendere voti migliori migliorando appunto lo studio. Sì.
When life gives you a fight, make sure to unleash the Guerrero in you. Reporting from Rome, Italy, I am Robbie Malabanan and I am 1 with 25.
All right, you're in the film, right?
Yep.
And you play what role?
Guerrero.
What role do you play?
I played the coach, Ramon's coach.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay. Congratulations.
Thank you. Don't forget to like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter and Tumblr. Also check out our boards and Pinterest and pictures on Instagram. I'm Sam Cepeda. Thanks for joining us.
And that's it for tonight's broadcast. I'm Alma Angeles and we're 1 with 25.